As we reflect on season one, the Christmas special, the non-special specials, what did we learn from this experience? Is the role of showrunner as RTD uh, now manifests himself? Is it too powerful compared to the BBC in-house role of producer, like Verity Lambert, Barry Letts? There seem to be many executive producers at Bad Wolf, but Russell Davies did say he does not surround himself with anyone who questions him. So do we miss that producer script editor relationship that can be rocky, can be creative? John Nathan Turner and Andrew Cartmel, Christopher H. Bidmead, Eric Sayward, Hinchcliffe and Holmes, Letts and Dix. The ability to be questioned. Has Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall as showrunners had too much power, like a fiefdom? And the ability, if in the wrong hands, to be very rigid and inflexible in their approach to Doctor Who. Where are the checks on power that Verity Lambert faced when she's called into Sidney Newman's office about the Daleks? What amount of influence is a showrunner allowed to kind of wield on the programme that the producers could only have dreamed of, like John Nathan Turner? So we had a debate about showrunner versus producer, because I have to say, if you list what Russell T Davies has currently done, there's no writer's room. He's got the American idea of a showrunner, but who are the writers? Who's the writer's room that he can actually kind of, mold? Davros has been changed, and that has been unchecked by the team. The sonic screwdriver has been changed radically because of some strange Mary Whitehouse idea that they're guns. This whole idea to go down the fantasy genre road, did anyone question that? The question of whether you should bother bringing Sutek back, because, to say, well, he was sat on the TARDIS is not good enough. Who's questioning him? Canon is changing, and it's changing fast. And I know in Doctor Who, people criticize, and say, listen, Brendan, you've got to get used to it. Things change. I know that. What I'm saying is, since 2017 till now, in only 7 years, you list how much has changed. The showrunners are just being, they're radicalizing the program. Political messaging is going unchecked. It's almost as if Doctor Who now is their political and personal platform. If they want to reshape the show, they have got the breadth and the muscle to do it. If in the wrong hands, RTD1 okay, RTD2 not sure, acting like an absolute monarch, what can you do if he's going too far? Can Bad Wolf pull him back? Can Disney pull him back? Can BBC pull him back? Check out our debate about the producer versus showrunner being best for Doctor Who. Verity Lambert launched Doctor Who and was very much part of its creation. And Russell Davies relaunched Doctor Who and is very much part of recreating it now. What's your preference, Rachel?
Oh, Verity or Russell? Probably Verity. I tend to prefer a producer over a showrunner as well, because what a producer allows for a producer like Verity is obviously, as Hugh said, like bringing in the different writers. There is more scope for imagination, more scope for building upon different aspects of the story that perhaps Verity might not have actually thought of. Whereas with Russell T Davies, he's very good. I'm not going to say that he's not very good. He brought it back with a bang with one of the scariest aliens that I could actually see on the screen ever. But he's more limited as a showrunner, because what he says goes, essentially. And whilst he may be open to ideas, he doesn't have to take them on board if he doesn't want to. So I think Verity is definitely the better one for me.
So, I mean, and I'm not going to keep repeating the question. Don't worry, panelists, and just come in. But basically, I'm saying this in a nutshell. We will look into the minutiae of producers versus showrunners, and those in the thread. We will look at various periods of Doctor Who. Don't worry. But this is just as kind of started off. It's quite a tasty question when you look at producer versus showrunner, to look at the latest person versus the very first one. Does anyone want to come on that with a kind of highlight where they would go with this conversation? Go on, Cinnamon.
Well, it's a very good question. I was quite surprised actually when I did see the thumbnail for this stream because it's a very good topic. Really, it's a little bit different from one that I think we've done.
Yeah.
It's quite a subjective one and to be fair, I would say the simple answer, I think right or wrong, is pros and cons to both. So whether you're personally in the camp of producer, there'll be many that are for that, and there'll be cons against that. And again, same way for a showrunner, there'll be some pros and cons for that. Again, I would say I'm somewhat slightly biased because I've only ever watched the show and known the show under a showrunner. Grew up under the Verity Lambert or you know Philip Hinchcliffe, Barry Letts, John Nathan Turner, and it's also you've got to also think about it in the time that TV was made, 60s, 70s, 80s. Television was just a different beast, to what we're getting now. I mean, when we talk about Americanizations in Doctor Who, look all this, this I guess one of them. The showrunner, I think, is a more American concept. It was a sort of recent thing. We got it in 2005, and it worked for its benefit. Again, I was saying before about Doctor Who coming back in 2005 with a bang, and this was one of those changes. So, it depends. It's a very individual thing. I think it depends on how you look at it.
What would you say to Bobby D's 75 here? I agree with what Time Scales has said. The showrunner shouldn't be writing most of the stories. The Tamura people, which goes way back, did that with the creator of the show and began to run out of ideas. RTD, after his first iteration, said he was running out of ideas. Stephen Moffat was exhausted. He was also doing Sherlock, I appreciate. Chris Chibnall, I think Chris Chibnall had too many ideas in one respect. I didn't want to go. But what would you say? Because obviously the producer in the old days, whether it was Verity Lambert, whether it was John Wiles, Barry Letts, whoever, they weren't really writing them. I know Barry Letts and a couple have had their fingers on the pie a bit, but they had the kind of overview of everything and casting, whereas a showrunner has a bit more power. So, but that means they're exhausted. It just means they're exhausted.
Yeah, and to put it, I won't get too bogged down into it, but to put it in football terms, previously a one manager would have a little bit more control over everything, whereas nowadays they're more defined in just a coaching role, and they'll have other people who take care of all the other side of the business. Whereas it's a little bit like this, at one point, it used to be like that, where it would be someone who would look after the space. It's sort of like a manager, looked after the general view of the show, and then you'd have the person who's actually writing the scripts, and then you'd have someone else who's obviously in the production team. Whereas it's the opposite of that has now happened. Now it's someone taking control of a lot more, someone who's got a lot more say, the big boss at the top of the thing, who's in charge of everything. Yeah, you're pointing at the comment there. The major difference to me is that producer.
Yeah, JWC reviews. The major difference to me is a bit like what you were saying, is that a producer is a bit like a project manager, overseeing but not inputting. I mean, they'll choose maybe the doctor, and we can talk about some of those examples later. They might change the tone of the show, blah, blah, blah. A showrunner is too close to the project, e.g. RTD. And RTD is going to come up, I think, a fair bit, especially in relation to maybe things recently. I will just shout out, just so we don't look as though we're going to be general for too long to our thread. But an example would that be Verity Lambert would fight her corner and had to fight her corner, and Verity Lambert would have had major input into how certain things were created. But she had a line manager. Well, she had quite a few line managers, and she didn't win every battle. The famous one is she won the battle about the Daleks and the bug-eyed monsters, and Sidney Newman said, the show, I'll back off. But that was she had to fight her corner. Whereas RTD, a few fans, or maybe are concerned that if he has an opinion or he has a message or he wants to push the show in a certain direction, who puts the brakes on him? And unlike the old days, it will be the head of Channel 1, BBC One, it will be the head of drama. Now it should be Jane Tranter and that team of Julie Gardner. But when me and Hugh were doing our show ages ago on the Russell Davies documentary, they all were basically blowing air in certain places. And sorry, they just think he's amazing. So, Brandon, you're listening patiently over there. I mean, what's your preference?
I think maybe they need to restructure the way they're doing it. Like, I don't know. What do you like the decision making? Yeah, it's always great to have like one person, one final say to yay or nay things, but maybe they need the actual people like who are creating the show to not just be one guy who's also the writer, the producer. I just think they need to fracture the hats that one guy's wearing. You know, so it's a lot like what Scales is always saying about like the showrunner thing. Just kind of it's like I said last week. It's a king. A monarchy's great when you've got a good king, but when a bad one comes along, you want democracy all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? So if he was doing things right and we were all down, it works great. But the way they've got their whole system structured now, when it's not working for a lot of us, it's just they need to maybe make some changes. I just don't know what those changes would be. Guys, shout out to John Yolden. He was sick. Just want to let him know we're thinking about him, man. He's watching.
He's in the chat.
He's in the chat.
And also hi to Kersey in the chat. Brendan, if I can chime in here on this, I'm here for the education today, and I'm already learning a lot because as an American, I don't know what the difference is between the showrunner and the producer with British television. And you've explained it here, yes, but this is something I haven't really thought of until just the last couple of days here. So I am learning, and I appreciate the education on that. And to echo what Brandon just said, I don't want to keep repeating it over and over, but I think that whoever is running the show should run the show. And I think there are tremendous opportunities for other types of stories to be told by other writers. And I don't believe that the people running the show, whichever capacity, as the showrunner and or the executive director, should be writing most of the stories. So there, I said it again. So
they're not nurturing and cultivating new talent either. Like they're not bringing in the next Moffatt, the next Mark Gatiss or something. They're not giving them a chance, it seems.
And they're not bringing back the old, really proven talent, like from the novels and Big Finish and what have you.
It's a meaty discussion, and
I think as a general rule, there's nothing wrong with having multiple people. In fairness, I will say that regardless of what side you're on. I think, as a general point, there's nothing wrong with having more voices. That would be one of those pros that I was speaking about. It's something, when it's just you, when you're the big boss, like J&T, he was the boss, but he also probably couldn't write. He probably admitted himself he's not a writer. He dabbled in acting. It wasn't for him. He was behind. He knew that his role was behind the camera. Again, it was different roles work for different people.
The thing is, when you look at the
promoting
producer,
the actual brand of it.
When you look at the producer role in the past, all Doctor Who fans of different ages will see Barry Letts worked closely with Terrance Dicks. Philip Hinchcliffe worked closely with Robert Holmes. Now, it might be funny, but JNT and Eric Sayward and Christopher H. Bidmead, but they did discuss things. Yes, there was some falling out as well, but there tended to be a bit more of a pairing going on. Then Andrew Cartmel with JNT later on, when he came up with the master plan. I think the problem now, when I hear people's criticisms, is that the showrunners now, Chibnall, RTD, Moffatt, whether they're getting tired or not doing too much, are not getting challenged, or when I say criticized, just challenged in that way to just check what they're doing and the logic of what they're doing. My famous example is Terrance Dicks and Barry Letts sitting down saying, do you know what? We need a Moriarty to Doctor Who. We need a new Moriarty character. And they invented the Master. Now, that was a master stroke. Now, has RTD got anybody saying, by generation, I'm not too sure. That kind of thing. It's so. Please get into the.
Yeah, you don't need anyone to say, "Oh, you're wrong."
It doesn't seem to be
doing it. Just someone else just to concentrate your mind a bit more. Just someone to share those ideas, bounce because it helps you as a person. If you're not just living
it's
in
just
your
like
own
us
echo chamber, so to speak. I bounce ideas. It's like us. I bounce ideas. I'm not always 100% sure in my opinion. I have an opinion, but I'm not completely so I'll exchange it. I'll share it with you guys, what you think. You take a little bit back, give a little bit more. That's what this is about. It's a bit like this, really. Whereas if I'm in my own little thing, I'm kind of, again, on my own. So again, as a writer, there's nothing wrong with, bouncing ideas off, sharing things. Not having someone say, change this, change that. That's silly. Just it's a simple collaboration of exchange.
Well, let me be fair and then bring in Jeremy, and then I think everybody's at least said something, and then everybody can have a free for all about examples, mistakes, highlights. I've mentioned the master, for example, invention. Verity Lambert defending and keeping the Daleks, which will have changed Doctor Who history, let's be frank. So everybody can have a free fall in a minute. But Jeremy, please come in. What's your, I mean, obviously we texted about this, but what's your philosophy? Share it with the viewers, please, on where you stand on showrunner versus producer.
I'd rather have a producer rather than a showrunner. And I think, as the points were made, but the fact was that I think the changes took place when J&T took over. And although he called himself the producer, he really was kind of a bit like a showrunner, overseeing quite a lot of the actual production, except for the first year when Barry Letts was the executive producer. So in the second year, then obviously he took over as the kind of the full producer, but was very much similar to Russell T Davies in the sense that he was a kind of showrunner, but the definition then wasn't widely known, so he was stuck with the label of producer. But I'd rather have a producer than a showrunner. I think the showrunner title, I think it overtakes the program a little bit, and the personality and the strength of the producer who's running it puts his stamp on the whole of the show in terms of all of the scripts and everything else. You've got to have a bit of diversity in terms of different writers to find out which writers stand out more than the others do. Otherwise we're not going to get another Robert Holmes or another Terence Dicks or Pip and Jane Baker or whatever.
It's interesting that in the past you had a producer with a strong lead writer, so to speak, like Robert Holmes, like Terence Dicks, like Eric Sayward. So in other words, you had that kind of overview producer knowing where the budget restraints are and what his boss is saying above, etc. And then you also had that more creative input between the two of them. J&T would say, I want a Trial of a Time Lord series, that sort of thing. He would set that kind of tone and direction, but the writers would do the work underneath. That's kind of my understanding of it in a way.
So, Brendan, there's a really interesting thing on this, which is that role, sort of like the Robert Holmes role, Douglas Adams, etc., is down previously as the script editor. And there are still script editors and have been script editors for New Who, and I couldn't name one of them.
Gary Russell is one of them, I think.
Could well be, but I mean they're not doing the role that was there previously.
No, it's a very different role. Now, Rachel, let's, just so everybody can see that we're going to expand this now. So basically, Rachel, give us a couple of your mistakes or highlights of a producer versus a showrunner, just so we can get arguing with you or agreeing with you.
Well, here's the thing, right? I was just going to, actually, my two penneth that I was going to put in.
Yes.
I've actually worked with producers and showrunners. So the level of control is completely different, and the feeling is different as well. A showrunner, as an actress working with a showrunner, it's everything is micromanaged, like down to the last detail, like push it out, and it's incredibly controlling. Whereas on another project that I've done, I've worked with producers. And yes, they're involved, and yes, they will make suggestions to be changed, but they rely on you as the performer to bring it to life and do a great job. And they will let you know if they don't like something. And it's the job of the director or the script writer to add to the show, so to speak, and then obviously producers will make changes where they see fit. But the difference in the level is quite something, which is actually I also think that's what affects my decision of I would rather work with a producer than a showrunner.
I think it improves in certain situations, certain contexts as well. I think it improves the quality of the scripts as well. When we talk about showrunners and producers, I mean, look at Moffatt. I mean, he was showrunner of Doctor Who, and then Sherlock at the exact same time. So if it wasn't already a lot of pressure on Doctor Who, then you doubled the pressure. Worrying about a whole different show, and then that was when and we talk about as much as Capaldi was amazing Doctor, the scripts weren't always the best. You get some good gems like the Mummy on the the train and the Mummy on the Orient Express. But like a lot of those start seasons, a lot of those they were a little bit samey, and and there was always that discussion, wasn't Doctor Who's coming a little bit like Doctor Who. Whereas again, if we had a producer, I don't think that would have happened. And again, there was less constraint, there was less pressure. I feel like to movies, if my car to two wheel it'd be a bike or whatever. I get that, but it's if there was a producer at that point in time, then we wouldn't have had perhaps the issues or the
Let's have a
stories
look.
that we don't. If we had a producer, it'd be better,
Well, that's why we're looking at examples, because examples hopefully enlighten us. Now, Rachel, what were you going to say?
Yeah, so it's just going back to what you were talking about with what Russell and Yasmin were saying on the Star Beast. I think a lot of this sort of thing also it gets like powerhoused by social media and the news. It becomes talking points. I've often said, particularly in some of my videos, that the golden age of the movie star and the producer, back 50, 60, 70 years ago, is dead, because there's no longer any boundaries and no longer any mystery surrounding that person. So they can now go and say what they like, and they utilize that, and they utilize it in their work as well. So that's all I was going to say.
Do you know, it's a bit like the royal family when the late Queen used to say, you never complain, never explain. And there's an element where you create a mystery, like the Hollywood stars you're talking about. And now, because we know so much about what makes each writer on the BBC crew tick, or why they've been selected, you're reading into it. And actually, if it's not your politics, you really do feel a little bit more challenged. And just like somebody, I think Melanie was saying in the thread, it's getting to that point. If you don't like where RTD is going with it, it's not your show anymore. As in, it's hard, isn't it? Because he's the immovable object, really. And it's a shame because with all the producers, you never got that feeling. You might see Jane Tina's Hawaiian shirt and all the rest of it, and that he was a bit more famous, but and flamboyant, but. JNT still made sure he just made sure the program still existed and was out there. There's a lot of places we can go with this, and I just want to throw one or two up there to get you all thinking. But for example, am I blaming too much the showrunner versus the producer? The BBC itself has imposed itself on this Doctor Who program many, many times when the producers had no choice. So sometimes when we're looking at how producers' mistakes or credit, it has to go higher too with that kind of discussion. It's a really difficult one, this, and I think the only way we can really navigate through this is via one or two of the examples and actually really look at how they've been played. So does anyone want to share one? I mean, I've got, for example, because I'm trying to fill in gaps if nobody's got one. But basically, let's have a look. Last one on RTD, because it's just the present story. Davros, as you know, is the last one. Now, we know the story. I'm not going to go over Davros Gate again. I'm not. So in the thread, don't worry. We've done shows on it. Every other stream's done it. I'm not going to do that. But this is what he said in Unleashed. And I wanted to just discuss whether we think this is the role of the showrunner going too far, or is this acceptable? So basically, as you know, time and society and culture and taste has moved on, and there's a problem with the Davros of old in that he's a wheelchair user who's evil, and I had problems with that, and a lot of us on the production team had problems with that, of associating disability with evil, and trust me, there's a very long tradition of this.
excuse me, I'm not blaming people in the past at all, but the world changes, and when the world changes, Doctor Who has to change as well. So we made the choice to bring back Davros without the facial scarring and without the wheelchair support unit. I say this is how we see Davros now. This is what he looks like. This is 2023. This is our lens, and Davros used to look like that, and he looks like this now, and that we are absolutely standing by. Now, you know, there's no compromise at all. Okay, he's the showrunner. He runs everything. He's a supremo. A producer would have to argue that point with the head of drama. And actually, because Davros is such an iconic character, it might have had to have gone to the head of BBC One, possibly. Now, I will say this, I will say this, and then I'll shut up, right? I'll say this and then I'll shut up on the Davros one. It's just an example. But basically, on the Davros point, if I would actually say, if the showrunner says the Davros character is problematic now in 2023, I would say, rather than compromise, mate, because he's having his cake and eating it, he's saying, I really love the Davros character, but I don't like how he looks. Well, I'm sorry, you can't have one or the other. So basically, park and retire the character. Be brave enough to do that as a showrunner, rather than, you know. Now, I know a lot of people want to come in, but if I'll let people come in on this example first, and then I will go to Brandon. Rachel?
Okay, so with Davros Gate, the fact that he drew attention to it was what made it problematic. It was never problematic to begin with. Exactly. The fact that he went and said all of that, that made it problematic. And then he introduced, so he gets rid of the life support system, brings in a new wheelchair user in a good role. Well, I say a good role, you know, it depends what your perception of good and evil is. And essentially he gimmicks her wheelchair immediately and blasts, and it's, you know, I say it's cool, but blasts off rockets and essentially turns it immediately into, in my opinion, a stereotype, a bit of a gimmick, a bit of a tool. And that wasn't fair. So it only becomes problematic if you draw an attention to it, and he drew attention to Davros and immediately to Shirley by turning her wheelchair into a weapon.
I mean, this is my issue, and Sadako, we're not debating the disability thing this time. It's been done. As he says, there's a part of me that gets what RTD is trying to do, and fine, we might agree with it or disagree with it. That's not my discussion tonight. My discussion is the idea that if that's his final decision as showrunner, he says that's final. There's nobody else to challenge that. There's nobody else to say, hold on, this is an iconic Doctor Who character. Exactly. And yes, you really feel like that's your issue, RTD. However, we as the BBC want Doctor Who to look like Doctor Who, and we want Davros to stay the same. But it looks as though that does not get a look in anymore. And that's when I get concerned about the role of showrunner versus the role of producer. And because he's bothered about the marketing and that. Brandon, you were going to come in.
Oh, I just had one quick thing to say. One of the ones I noticed was look at Moffatt when he took over from RTD's first run. You know, I told you and Rachel yesterday that I'd recently, within a space of a couple of days, I binge watched season 10, right? I'm on the hunt for where this all went wrong. And I noticed there wasn't anybody to kind of tap. There must not have been anybody to tap Moffatt on the shoulder and say, hey, pal, back up a little bit. You know, you don't need to tell them Bill's gay every episode. They know, they saw, you know what I'm saying? Just little things you saw them doing and little jabs and stuff is you could see there that there needed to be, that's just one of probably many cases where somebody need to put a hand on their shoulder and say, whoa, back up a little bit.
Yeah, because I think Doctor Who was successful in the end because actually they had budgetary constraints and various other constraints. And in the end, you had to really think carefully and do amazing experimentation with CSO and lots of other things. And so, of course, when you've got somebody who's got no brakes on them and a big budget, you then really go in such a completely different direction to where you could have been with challenge and, breaks on it. I really do think if you don't like the Davros character and you're a Doctor Who showrunner, you need to make a decision. You either stick with the character which everybody recognizes, or you think it's not good for this generation and he's just retired. It's as simple as that. You can't have both.
You don't have
that's-
to use them. You don't.
No.
There's no gun to their head that they have to use a villain if they can come up with other ones that'll entertain us. You know.
Yes,
But it's cheap to say, I want to use the Davros name that somebody else created. And yes, but I'm not. Yeah. Go on, Jeremy.
But you see, Russell T Davies has a need to change the character. He has to be seen to change the character. He has to be seen to change everything. And this is why it brings it back to political correctness and wokeness. And that's what he's doing. He's championing that cause. And that's why he's made all the changes in this particular reiteration.
But I'm fascinated. I mean, just with this example, and then tell me to shut up. But with this one example, for example, the same showrunner used Davros before and brought him back and thought in his wheelchair, in his life support machine, he was vital to see. Yeah. So what's happened in the intervening time? I'm not aware of a cultural revolution. Actually, I'm not aware of any major.
Hey, was that a pun? Like the revolution of wheelchair wheels?
So yeah, and I'm thinking, gosh, the same person, the same showrunner now thinks that something he brought back in season 4 suddenly wants the opposite. Incredible.
It wasn't a problem for this producer, Davros. So
no,
I didn't have a problem with it either.
No, and so anyway, so there's my example of where showrunner goes too far.
I agree with everyone on the panel, but I really do have to put this in that I believe with Davros, Russell T Davies may have actually gotten it right, and I know that that's not a popular opinion. But when I saw the Davros change, I thought that someone was making a joke on Twitter because I had never considered Davros to be in a wheelchair. So what I did is I contacted Galen Lay, Broadway music composer and a famous and highly respected public disability rights advocate and public speaker for disability access in the performing arts. She is a long-term wheelchair user, and she said that she did see Davros to be problematic because as a long-term wheelchair user, she did see Davros as being disabled, and she believed it was for the better. So I will take her opinion as a famous public disability rights speaker and advocate, and then go to you, Rachel. Rachel, I also agree with you completely that one of the huge problems in it was calling attention to it.
Yeah. Just to counter that, it's interesting that the lady that said that, because one of my best friends, he's a wheelchair user, and when I told him what Russell T Davies said, he told me to F off. He thought it was hilarious that Russell T Davies fought like that. Because,
how British.
yeah, I know, right? Straight to the point. You think I'm blunt? No, but yeah, he thought completely the opposite. So I just found that interesting. That's all.
Well, and it also supports this overall question: Do the executive producers and the showrunners have too much control? Maybe it wasn't the right decision. How many people were on the team, and who could stop something like that from happening if it was actually wrong?
If he ends up
does
being
the
on the right
showrunner have
side,
the final say?
But this is the point. I didn't want to get into the Davros debate per se. I wanted to say the actual issue was, in this case, yes, serendipity he might be on the right side of history. But that's he might be just lucky this time round. You never know. That's not my point. My point is it's quite clear nobody's challenged him. It's just
so I think there's a separate thing here, which I mentioned before on this, which is I think if you have a character that is perceived as disabled, it is wrong generally to have that as an able-bodied actor. And that then causes the problem more, I think, than having the character of Davros, but having an actor who isn't disabled and who isn't in a wheelchair now, I think, is harder.
I think under 3 showrunners, the show has been fundamentally changed, radically changed by so many things. Timeless children, fugitive doctors, war doctors, time war. This could be good or bad, but the
River
amount
Song.
the amount of changes in Doctor Who under 3 people compared to those others is, I think, showing you that these people have excessive power, and sometimes I think they're changing the program from something that it actually was. That's me being.
Bryn, I think one of the things is it's not just about power. It's if you put that list of producers up, leaving aside those of us who are geeks and who know some of them, and some of them might be known Verity for obvious reasons, John Nathan Turner perhaps for obvious reasons, but even someone like Philip Hinchliffe, who I think is incredibly important, or Barry Letts, if you go outside of fandom, no one has heard of them. No one. Whereas what we now have is Russell Davies's Doctor Who, Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who, Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who, because people hear of them because they do the publicity. And say, people know that now, but then no, it wasn't the face of Doctor Who, which the showrunner is.
This is what I feel like with this one, particularly because it came off the back of the Caves of Androzani, which was a brilliant story. What I feel like is, because I said in the last show that Peter Davison's Doctor is more humane, he's a little bit more arrogant, a lot more calmer, and I think what JNT wanted was a bit erratic in his decision. He wanted the complete opposite. Now, he knew that Colin was going to give that to him acting-wise, because Colin, I think, is much more like the earlier Doctors, in my opinion, particularly Patrick Troughton, in many respects. But he also wanted to do that through the costume. And I believe the costume designer thought that was a joke. Yeah, he does wear it well. I do agree. He does wear it well. It's a brilliant cut on him. But the costume designer thought it was a joke. So she brings it to Jonathan Nathan Turner, and he gives it this stamp of approval, and it's like, what were you thinking? And so there is a line. I've got it on a T-shirt. I'm a walking work of art. I've actually got that on a T-shirt with the picture of Colin's coat on it, but he just picked it up and he wore it. But to be honest with you, with a loud and quite brash Doctor, do you really need that kind of coat?
Now, on this, Rachel, honestly, let's go to it, because sometimes it's great to dovetail with a thread. Hello, JWC Reviews. I know you're on earlier, don't worry. Speaking of coats, JNT's insistence that the Doctor have a designated costume from Davison onwards, and that question mark collar with Tom Baker onwards, is an example of the producer interfering. And I agree with you there. I can't always hit on the showrunners because I hated that. Yeah. And it's interesting now that you hear other, or maybe the same Doctor Who fans going mad about the Shooty Doctor having so many different costumes to the point where he doesn't have a recognizable silhouette. So which is it? Are we just contrary fans? Are we really having a problem with, as JWC Review says, and I agree with him, that basically, I mean, the cricket outfit also was a little bit more of a cosplay when you really look at it.
Yeah.
It was a standout. And the celery, what the hell was a celery? When you look at the question mark, when you look at Sylvester McCoy's question mark umbrella, I know, John Yulden, you love it, but hello, come on. It started to take the mick out of the program. And
strangely enough, sorry, Brendan, to cut you off. I wrote down the stick of celery because that was contested actually by Peter Davison. And he said, I will wear the stick of celery so long as you can explain what it's for.
Yeah, yeah. And we had to wait till Caves of Androzani. last minute.
A while.
Yeah, last minute.
Just took a while.
But since Rachel has raised Colin's costume, but it looks as though JWC Reviews and myself can raise other ones. And then if we come to 2024, the 15th Doctor's been in a kilt in a nightclub in just a tight white top. He's wearing a leather jacket, blah, blah, blah. Which is it? What do we want? Do we think the showrunner's got it right, that he needs to be a bit more authentic nowadays and changeable? Or do we need to risk going down this marketing road as JNT did?
What I'm wondering if this could possibly be for marketing of action figures, because I'm still waiting for the Shooty Gatwa action figure in just his underwear. Now, imagine if there was a new Shooty Gatwa action figure in
Where is
each
it?
of his costumes. Well, you know, Doctor Who fans have shelves, and I can just imagine a shelf lined up with all of the Shooty Gatwa action figures in each different costume.
I don't think Al Dua's going to do one. I don't think he's going to produce one. I don't think he's got plans for that. Yeah.
I mean, how would now? So I've asked you about costume. Nobody's biting at the moment on that one. What about if I said then?
Oh yeah,
okay,
yeah, it's tradition, man. I would keep it. Sorry, I was actually thinking about what everybody was saying. Just let me say, I'll just say real quick. I wouldn't mess with that. I understand like doing small variations, kind of like Tom Baker did, maybe a different hat, different jacket, little things like that. But I think it's good, especially for young people and kids, to make that image a lot more iconic and recognizable. So they should more or less look fairly similar, unless they're in a special situation or like a big gala or something, need to wear a tux. But overall, I think it's very important to the way they've, at least up until now, that they portrayed the Doctor, and they need to keep doing that, in my opinion.
Right, now before we just kind of bring the debate to a certain point, I just want to remind people that obviously we've a lot of our panelists might be saving their fire for some of these items. We're going to be looking at these tonight. You can see them there, so stay with us. We are going to be doing that. But I've got my question from a panel now. Since we're talking about producer versus showrunner, who actually was the best custodian of Doctor Who over the 60 years?
You're going to start a fight.
I mean, who did it?
It's going to be a scrap.
Cinnamon wants to start, and don't worry, we will get back to Rachel with your example. But go on, Cinnamon. Who actually, in the end, either by accident or fluke or whatever, was the best custodian of Doctor Who? And was it a producer? Was it a showrunner?
I think it's got to be, for me, I would say J&T. And, you know, yes, he tried to leave at certain points, but, you know, and the fact that, you know, kind of coerced staying a bit longer, you know, he's like, oh, begrudgingly, you know, he spent a lot of his time on that. And do you know what? For the mistakes, yeah, and we can look at the things like pretentious question marks and stuff like that, all the silly things of that era, and all the things at the time that fans are frustrated about. But I think, at the end of the day, from what was it, producer, all this, you know, back in all this other jobs he's done on the show throughout the years, he spent a lot of his life on this show. Really, you know, when we talk about service and stuff like that, that's a lot. He dedicated a lot of his time to the show. As fans, you know, we have our moments, and sometimes we do take it a bit far within reason, and you know, he did a lot, and you know, and he always tried his best, and to make it bigger and make it better and to make it fit into the 80s, didn't he? And it's just a shame that, you know, that it would always get something for him after he left the show, and it never really happened, and he kind of it didn't really get much better from after that. So it's unfortunate how.
Well, as we go around the panel, I mean, on the J&T score, I have to say, I think it's quite clear that there was a point when he was trying to get out, and I think fair enough for everybody's career, he was trying to get out. But actually, because the BBC was so disinterested in Doctor Who, if he left, the show was over. So bless him, in many ways, he kept it going up to 89. The other thing is, I was at the 1983 convention, the Lonleat one, and he got the Americans involved. He had conventions in Chicago. I mean, whether we call him showman or whatever, he was trying desperately to keep this program going. So he was a bigger, larger than life producer, and he really did try and make Doctor Who go global.
He was ahead of his time as well, massively, I think.
Yeah. So where does anyone else want to go with who was the best custodian of Doctor Who?
I would say John Nathan Turner, funny enough, because I think at the end of the day, he had a kind of symbiotic relationship with the show. You know, whether that was the right sort of relationship or not as producer, I don't know. Whether he should have been distant from the show, you know, separate. But I think he did care for the show quite a lot, and I think it does show in terms of him going abroad and promoting it. and I think that shows over the years. However, again, I think he stayed too long. I think he got typecast as a science fiction, Doctor Who producer, and I think he should have left a few years earlier.
I think this is the problem, that when the BBC got neglectful of Doctor Who, you had to hope that there was somebody who actually was putting it first. He certainly didn't put his career first. Brandon, where would you go on your decision?
Ooh, it's hard, but like if I started to narrow it down, it'd be between Terrence Dicks, JNT, maybe Hinchcliffe. For me, it's between JNT or Terrence Brooks. I mean, just personally for me, as far as talking about the things that I like a lot, you know what I mean? Because we each like a little bit of something. We like a lot of the same things about Doctor Who, but each of us has our own little niche thing that we like about it that's different than the others. Like me and John are partial. We like the Seventh Doctor and stuff. You know what I mean? Or like that whole era. So JNT for me, probably because he gave quite a bit of himself to keep it going. So he's definitely deserves recognition for that.
And you know what? He started the 45-minute format. Raw format, didn't he?
Hey, look, Michael Jordan, he was the greatest basketball player of all time, but he didn't come out and win every game. He tried to win every game. So I think JNT was trying to get slam dunks and 3-pointers, but you can't win every game, and that's definitely one of the worst ones he lost, because I hate that format now that I've watched Classic Who.
It was JNT who actually formatted the repeats into the 5 faces of Doctor Who. Everybody of a certain age, that was a masterstroke. This man loved the program so much, he was fighting it to get it on BBC Two. He was fighting to get new fans in. RTD will make an argument about getting Generation Z and it's not for any of us anymore. Okay, whatever. JNT was trying to win new fans who didn't know there was a Doctor before Tom Baker in the 5 faces of Doctor Who. That was a masterstroke. I have to say, I'm surprised at myself at the moment, but in the end, JNT, he did do an awful lot. He was around for a long time, but he did do an awful lot, and I could see the passion behind it. Rachel, what would you like to say?
But oh gosh, what my producers? Oh, it would be between Verity Lambert and JNT, because Verity had the responsibility of introducing everything and getting people involved and getting people to sit down bums on seats and watching it, and that is a difficult thing to do. That wouldn't be easy to do. And JNT, because he kept it going. Oh, yes. And this one. Thank you. You reminded me. Adric.
You're going to praise that the JNT was really good at casting. That's what you're going to do, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to praise that as per se. Now, I don't like criticizing actors. So I'm not going to criticize because I'm an actor. I know exactly how he feels. I mean, this is Earthshock, so but
he's about to feel pretty damn bad.
He's about to feel pretty damn bad. Yeah. I was literally thinking it. I didn't know if I should say. Now, I was actually watching Full Circle today, in preparation, just to see if my opinion is: was it the acting, was it the choice of actor, or was it the fact that he was a bit half-hearted and couldn't be bothered to continue on with Adric's actual proper characterization? And that's nothing to do with Matthew Waterhouse. That's purely to do with the fact that I actually think JNT started out really strong with the introduction of Adric and sort of gave up on the character, and he was on to the next idea. Now, I've written down here, Matthew Waterhouse, it's not his fault. He was very much a newbie actor, and newbie actors are generally in need of something to grab onto, so they've got something to refer to in order to help them maintain the character portrayal. And he was always described as the Artful Dodger type of character, and in Full Circle, he definitely had that. And I would say he carries it off as a newbie actor pretty well. I will say that. Now, I do think that the actor who plays his brother would have been better as Adric,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you can't. I can't like fault him for what he was trying to do. You could see he was trying, and he offered the friction. He put the friction there, and he was reacting exactly how it should be. But then in other stories, they just focused on his mathematical genius, and I think because they didn't focus on all of the elements of Adric, Matthew ended up feeling a bit lost and didn't know quite where to put himself sometimes. And then when they did bring it back, because there were a couple of stories where they brought it back, suddenly the character that you see in the beginning when he's first introduced and how he chose to play it comes back, but it's only briefly, because I think they couldn't be bothered with the character, and they realized the character wasn't as popular as what they hoped it would be, which is how they wrote him out, which was a very definite ending. Sad, but very definite ending. And I just felt he kind of got a bit sidelined, and it was a bit unfair, and his character didn't get the development that it deserved. A Big Finish. Now, I've not actually listened to any of Matthew's stories on Big Finish, so I don't know how well they've developed the character, but they did.
If you put that list of producers up, leaving aside those of us who are geeks and who know some of them, and some of them might be known, Verity for obvious reasons, John Nathan Turner perhaps for obvious reasons, but even someone like Philip Hinchliffe, who I think is incredibly important, or Barry Letts, if you go outside of fandom, no one has heard of them. No one. Whereas what we now have is Russell Davies's Doctor Who, Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who, Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who, because people hear of them because they do the publicity. And say, people know that now, but then no, it wasn't the face of Doctor Who, which the showrunner is.